Hey, how's it going? My name is John Good. If you don't already know, I'm sure most of you probably know who I am. But in this exclusive content, I want to talk about a specific topic. And that topic is free cybersecurity training enough to land a job? I get asked this all the time. And so I really wanted to take some time to just kind of unedited talk about this. I'm taking some notes. And so we'll roll through that. And again, this isn't going to be edited. This is exclusive content. So this isn't for everybody, but it's for you because you're watching it right now, right? So one of the problems that I see a lot, right, like all the time, is people are constantly pushing free content and they say that it can solve all of your learning needs. We hear this all the time from a whole bunch of different people. I especially see this coming from content creators on YouTube specifically and social media influencers that are on other platforms. So things like LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever the case is, all these other platforms. Now, one of the things that we often hear or they often say is that if you take this free training or take all this free training and don't spend money on learning the basics. And honestly, in my personal opinion, right, this is trash advice. I do not like this advice. I don't like when people give this advice because they are literally setting you up for that mindset and thinking that free training is going to solve all of your problems. Now, just as a disclaimer, I've taken free training, I've taken paid training, I've taken SANS training, I've taken a master's degree program that I completed. So I've taken really all over the spectrum as far as different costs, different types of training, different delivery mechanisms for that training. So I'm speaking from that point of view, not from somebody who is just kind of making assumptions on certain training or making bold statements about certain training that I've literally never taken. I have that experience taking all these different types of training because frankly, there are uses for different kinds of training. But with that being said, the first thing that I want to touch on here is, should you spend money on training? I think that's one of the biggest initial questions that a lot of people have or that people think about is, should you spend money on training or should that be free? So that's an important question, important distinction, important thing that you have to consider. Now, when we're talking about people in cybersecurity or people trying to get into cybersecurity, most people want to go fast. When I get people that come to my training platform, Cyber Training Pro, or that hit me up on YouTube or LinkedIn or something that contact me and want to get into cybersecurity, that have comments or whatever the case is, they want to go fast. They do not want to go slow. They don't want to, take a long time to get into cybersecurity or in the tech field, in IT. And one of the things that you have to realize or come to the realization is that free training does not equal fast training in almost every situation. So think about that for a second. Okay. Free training does not equal fast training in almost every situation. That's a key point that you need to keep in your head because that is absolutely true across the spectrum with nearly every single piece of free training that exists. Now, free training has both pros and cons. So that's where we want to shift this discussion next. So let's start talking about the pros. Now, what are pros of free cybersecurity training? Well, cost is almost always a pro that people look at first when we're talking about free training. Who doesn't want free training? Who doesn't want to get, ideally high quality training that is great, that's going to give you everything you need for free? That sounds amazing, right? That would be great if we could all get that. Absolutely. Is that true? Well, that's not something we're going to talk about in this second, but that is definitely a pro that goes along with free training. Now, low investment equals low risk if you don't like it. So since we're talking about people that are trying to get into the career field, into cybersecurity, into the tech field, whatever, right? Low investment equals low risk. So you are not having to put a bunch of resources or money or time, things like that, into free training. And that results in low risk because ultimately, what are you going to be out of if it doesn't work out or you don't enjoy it or something like that? Maybe you lost a couple hours of time. Maybe you lost a week. Maybe you lost a month, but you didn't lose a lot of time. You obviously didn't lose a lot of money because it's going to be free training, or at least, mostly free training. Sometimes we see free training that has different things that they promote or different things that they say that you should sign up for to use because you get more features, or that's the only way that you can really follow along with everything that's in the content. So it's not always free necessarily, but keep that in mind. Generally, a low investment, low risk to you if it doesn't work out. Now, another pro with free training is that it might be sufficient for your situation. Depending on what situation you're in, depending on the topic that you're looking to learn about or study more, it might be correct or appropriate to have a free training. It might be a very small subset of a topic or something that you need to learn just a little bit more about. For instance, subnetting. Subnetting is a really good example of a topic that is going to have a decent amount of free training. Now, that might not be 100% of a topic that you want to completely just go free with, but there's a lot of practice exercises and things like that that are out there that can at least introduce you to the topic or help you with some practice exercises or whatever the case is. Now, that doesn't mean that every single free training is sufficient for your situation. There are absolutely certain situations or certain career field, certain areas of the career field, cybersecurity, of the tech field of IT, where that is not going to be the case. You're going to need much more than what is included in those free trainings because you need to be at a professional level. And free training does not always get you to a professional level. Keep in mind that when we're talking about training, there is kind of this spectrum of training where you have like beginner, very introduction, and you're kind of just starting out to learn it. Or I guess it really starts out at zero, right? Like absolutely nothing. And then you can learn a little bit. Or on this other side here, you have professionally proficient. Now, obviously, then you get to like expert and like those kinds of additional designations. But professional proficiency is not the same thing as being introduced to something. We see a lot of introductory kind of courses that introduce concepts or introduce a certain area to you, but that would in no way make you professionally proficient. You could not go do that job or that skill set or that task if you were put into an actual position or situation where you had to do it, but you've kind of seen it. It's like you've seen a demo of somebody doing something, or you've done it in a very isolated environment that has no choice but to work. But that's a key point as well. Now, another pro with free training is it does tend to be shorter in length. A lot of free training is just short. When you were talking about free training, somebody who is let's say a senior level professional or an experienced professional that has the knowledge of a certain area that you need the training for, maybe a course is for or something like that, or even people that don't necessarily have the knowledge of certain topics or certain, they don't have the skill set or the experience in those, either way. But those free trainings tend to be shorter. You don't have those people that are going to put in 1,000 hours, 100 hours, maybe a couple hundred hours, 50 hours, whatever, into free training because it logically just doesn't make sense. So that is, I don't think people always understand the level of commitment that people have when we're talking about free training and the amount of effort that whoever is creating it is willing to put in. Now, what about cons? So as far as cons, well, the first one is frequently this free training that's out there has glaring gaps of information or skills. When I was mentioning that somebody might not have the correct experience or background to teach a certain subject, that is going to create gaps of information or skills that they cannot teach you. They don't know to teach you. They don't know what it is. They don't know how to teach it. Whatever the case is, they don't put enough effort into it because it's a free course. All of these things contribute to the idea that there are going to be gaps in there. I've never seen a free course that is entirely complete on a certain subject. It just doesn't happen unless it is so small of a subject that it's so narrowly focused on a certain subject that it's literally, a 10-minute video or something. And then that is the entire training. And that is a complete training because it's such a specific thing that is being taught. That doesn't typically happen though, right? Usually we have courses that are long or, short-ish if they're free, right? But they're not going to be just like a specific little tiny area. Usually they cover it, try to cover a decent amount or promise that they're going to cover a decent amount. Now, the next con is low production value. These are things that can make it difficult to learn. So, for instance, and I'm sure you've seen this if you've taken any free training, but for instance, noise issues. As you can hear on my microphone, I have a professional grade microphone, right? I have professional grade audio, all of those things, professional video, and just a professional setup. And so you're not going to get those like humming noises or buzzing noises or weird things like that, weird lighting issues that create distracting glare or anything like that. You're not going to see that in my content because I put a lot of value into my content, a lot of production value into my content. But when you see a lot of the free training, it does tend to have that. Low quality microphones, low quality editing, low quality noise correction, low quality lighting, low quality video, low quality presentations, right? Like low quality. And those things make it very difficult for you to learn. So I'm telling you, I have been through trainings like that and I have left trainings that are like that because it's just distracting and it's not productive if you're trying to learn. Now, the third con is going to be instructors tend to have minimal qualifications. I kind of already touched on this, if they have any, and that's why it's free. So a lot of times with free training specifically, there is very low barrier to entry. And again, that's why it's free, because the people that a lot of times will make that training tend to be low on qualifications or not have anything, not have experience, not have the right kind of experience. All of those things are very, very common in free training. Not always. So I will caveat that with not always. There are absolutely some free trainings that are out there or have been out there in the past or that will be out there in the future that you just have somebody that has gone through and done some free training, and that's fine. I've done free training. So that is completely fine. But I would say that the larger majority of that free training that is out there, that is an applicable statement. And so when that happens, are you getting the right kind of value out of that? Because remember, it may be a free cost training. So you don't pay any money for it, but you're investing your time. You're investing maybe some resources, some effort, some energy, all of those things that are free, but they aren't really free. You have an opportunity cost, so you cannot take that time that you spend on that training and use it towards another training or use it to do something else, use it to go on a trip or whatever. You can't exchange that time once you've burnt that. And you have to be really careful with who you're learning from, because certainly there are a lot of different benefits that you can get from different people that are going to know certain things or have certain skill sets, have certain expertise and things like that. But, at the end of the day, if you're going to try to get in this career field and be proficient and be ready to hit the ground running and do all the things that you need to do you really want to be learning from somebody who doesn't have the correct experience or enough experience to legitimize or validate what they're actually saying? Personally, I do not, because I think there is a tremendous amount of risk with doing that, and you're not going to get the things that you always need out of that. So keep that in mind. Now, have I used free training before? I kind of already touched on this a little bit, but I want to touch on it again. So again, the majority of free training that's worth anything today is very targeted in what it teaches. Talked about this earlier. It needs to be very selective and very narrow, especially with free training, because you want it to be very targeted. You want that person to have taken the time and invested it in a certain area that's very targeted. Okay, so that's key number one. So there, for example, there's a lot of videos that are walkthroughs. So they walk through technologies, they perform tutorial kind of tasks, those kinds of things. Those are very targeted trainings. And those tend to be very useful in the grand scheme of things, because those focus on a very specific thing, right? It's just like what I was talking about. It's not this blanket thing trying to teach you the entire CISSP common body of knowledge, right? Which is all the exam objectives and everything like that. It's a very specific task, very specific technology, very specific thing that is a consumable training. Now, free training, again, I've said this, free training that's broad in what it supposedly covers almost always comes up short, and it's not going to help you in the long run. If it overpromises and it's free especially, then it's probably going to underdeliver. Now, paid training can certainly underdeliver. That is totally not uncommon. We've seen that in different training programs and different things that are out there. But generally, it's almost always true for free training, unfortunately, right? But again, it comes down to the effort that people are willing to put into free training, and it's not always there, especially the broader it gets. Now, how have I approached training in my career? So as I was coming up through my career, I decided basically what I felt was a reasonable price for solid training. So if I found good training, I would be willing to pay X. And that's the number I used as I was looking at different training options. Now, keep in mind, as I became more familiar with the career field and started to advance and all those kinds of things, that number started to adjust, and it will for you as well, because now you have more funds. Maybe you have a budget that you can put towards that your employer is giving you. All of those things matter. And especially if you have a budget that is not you're not your money, but it's your company giving you a budget of, like, let's say $5,000, you better try to maximize that $5,000 if you're going to use it. So if it's your personal money, you may be careful, right? But, that's another important consideration. Now, once I landed a job, what I started doing was I set aside part of my paycheck, so part of every paycheck, for a personal training budget. Why is that? Well, with training in your career, you have to own your career. If you don't take ownership of your career, I'm sorry, but you are going to not hit the maximum ceiling or potential of your career. If you primarily or completely rely on your employer to fund all your learning, you're going to find yourself in a weird situation where a lot of employers aren't doing that. They would rather pay you. And then you're not going to be getting the training that you need, and you're going to start seeing diminishing returns where you're kind of starting to fall behind because you're not current on what you need to be tracking. Now, every time that I change jobs, when I went to a different job, I get promoted, all of those things, I increased that amount that I set aside. Like I said, I increased that amount as I got more familiar, as I advanced in the career field and got experience in all those things. Because it needs to be relative to how much you're making, the next kinds of roles that you need to land, how much training you would personally want to take. All of those things are considerations you have to make. Now, if employers offered a training budget, I took advantage of it, but it wasn't a major factor in how I decided which jobs to pursue. I'll be completely honest. A ton of my training that I have attended, that I have been a part of, that I have been a student in, all of that stuff has largely been funded by me, not my employers. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. Typically, when an employer funds your training, then you are going to be committed to them for a certain period of time. Usually, it's about a year, sometimes 6 months. It's usually not more than a year. It's usually not less than 6 months, or you have to pay it back. I've heard of some companies saying like 2 years, but that's not typical. Sometimes with degrees, it can change because they might say, okay, we'll do the degree program, and then you have to commit to us for so long after that, or we will renew it every year, and then that's another year each time, something like that. But it's going to vary. But the reason why I funded a lot of my training is because I didn't necessarily always want to be committed in that sense where I was forced to do something, especially if you get to the point where you're looking outside of that company or looking at other positions, things like that. Because, if they say you have to stay in that department or that team, that can be limiting as well. So you have to just consider these things, and it's a personal decision what you want to do. But again, in this career field, your salaries are going to start bumping up very rapidly from when you first start. And so if you're making, 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, and you're entirely relying on your employer to fund your training, that just, that doesn't make sense because you're putting all your reliance on that employer and you're not taking any of the responsibility on your own shoulders. Now, you should always be trying to gain more skills and improve and constantly grow in your career because ultimately you may not stay at a certain employer forever. And you need to be ready when you hit that job market, or if they start laying people off or firing people and you're one of those unfortunate ones, what kind of skill set do you bring to the table? If you haven't been to a lot of trainings and you've just been doing your job, you may not have enough to set you apart from other candidates. And that's an important consideration and distinction that you need to be aware of. So you always need to be learning in this career field. It's part of the career field. I'm sorry if you don't enjoy that, but you will have to keep learning. Now, a huge concern in new professionals. So with new professionals, so new people in cybersecurity are trying to get into cybersecurity, they're looking essentially in a lot of cases for basically a completely free path to a 6-figure income. Now, I hate to break this to you, but that does not exist. If that existed, more people would do it, and we would not have a shortage in cybersecurity because we would have a ton of people in this career field that were just equipped with everything they need, and they would have done it for free. So that just does not exist, but that expectation seems to increasingly be there with a lot of people that are new to the career field. Now, just like any investment that you make, as you make more money in your job, you need to be willing to invest some of that in your learning. We've talked about this a lot already in this video and on other videos on my channel and everything, but you need to take ownership of your own career, and that will help set you apart. That will do a lot of the things that you need to do. That will give you the skills and knowledge that you need, and that will not make you completely reliant on your employer. Doesn't mean don't rely on your employer, and if they have a training budget, you don't have to don't use it, right? You can make that decision to use it or not, but take advantage of all the resources that are available to you, and don't be afraid to invest a little bit of money in yourself. ultimately, if you invest in yourself, that shows that you believe in yourself. If you don't want to invest in yourself, do you really believe in yourself? It's an interesting, an interesting kind of situation. So believe in yourself. Now, people who rely on free training or their employer to completely take care of their career development, just like I said, they are going to suffer and they will not fully reach their potential. So if you rely on your employer is not always going to be interested with the next new hot thing or the next technology or something in cybersecurity. They're going to be interested in what is directly applicable to their business and to your job. So if those things don't match what's new or where your interests are going or that next step in your career, why are you relying on your employer? Don't do that. Do not rely on them for that. Rely on yourself, invest in yourself. If you can use what your employer is giving you to tackle some of that stuff and learn some of that new stuff, great. That's amazing. But at the end of the day, this is your career. Don't worry about necessarily what your employer thinks about your career, because you need to look out for you and your career and how that is going to evolve over time and how you're going to continue to grow your personal brand and your career so that you can get those positions that you ultimately want. So all this information is really important. These are things that people don't always think about, especially when they're talking about free training and the idea of what kind of training can I get? Who should pay for my training? Who should I rely on to get me training? All those kinds of things. At the end of the day, you got to worry about yourself and you got to make sure that you're getting what you need from a career standpoint, either via your employer or from your own pocketbook or your own wallet, or from free resources and other things that are out there that you can leverage as well. Okay, so keep all that in mind. And if you have any questions or anything like that about it, then definitely feel free to hit me up and ask me about it, leave a comment, all those kinds of things. But with that being said, hope you enjoy the content. See you in the next one.